going on, Monarch?
What's up? What's up?
Oh, chilling. Got people kind of rolling in. Elsa's here, but okay. I wonder. Basically, I guess this past week, the House voted on HR 3755, which is the Women's Health Care Protection Act of 2021. And the way that the news media has kind of portrayed this is as codifying Roe versus Wade. Okay, so the Supreme Court case law, and does anybody know when Roe versus Wade actually went into effect? You'd think with all of my useless knowledge, I'd have that somewhere. Okay, it was 1973. Anyways, with a very conservative Supreme Court. Anyways, Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973. And because there's a majority of the people on the Supreme Court right now are conservative, Congress is looking, since the Democrats and the liberals, the leftists, have both the House, the Senate, and the presidency, the executive branch. They're looking to try to codify Roe versus Wade and make it a statutory instrument among the federal government, in which the federal government would try to impose on the states. And so Alice was asking about this, and it's kind of an in-depth question because there are a whole lot of things surrounding this that get pretty detailed in particular. And the one Ark and I this afternoon were kind of talking about some of these things. So I guess the first and foremost thing that we should talk about is the difference between a codified statutory instrument and a Supreme Court case law. I think that's probably would be the first thing to get out of the way. So
Yeah.
just for kicks and giggles, which do you think is more powerful?
Supreme Court may be more powerful than a statute.
The Supreme Court, yes, Alice, 100%. The Supreme Court is absolutely more powerful than a statute. And I've gone over this in a couple of videos that I've done, but here in the United States, in America, where we don't accept titles of nobility unless you're an esquire or something. But the whole idea of it is that no man's supposed to be below the law, no man's supposed to be above the law. And the law is supreme, or is supposed to be supreme in this country. And that's why the Supreme Court and the judiciary, it doesn't matter what the legislature has passed. It doesn't matter what the executive signs into action. It doesn't matter how the executive executes that action or that government that the legislature has produced. The courts can come in, and this is why they're a separate branch of government. And they can come in and say, well, I'm glad that you did all of that work, but guess what? It's not lawful. So we got to stop you. Like you can't execute these statutory instruments on people if it's not lawful. And ideally, that's the way it's supposed to work. But everybody has heard of the Supreme Court shooting down cases for not being constitutional. I believe the first one they ever shot down, and they established this authority that they really already had, and everybody knew they already had it. And I think they just established this because they knew they didn't have jurisdiction, was Marbury versus Madison. And so that's the very first Supreme Court case law where they established very, very clearly that the Supreme Court is the supreme law, and that they can strike down a statute, even if that statute reads exactly what the Constitution reads, like Marbury versus Madison. But yes, the Supreme Court case law is more powerful because we're supposed to live in a nation of laws and not men. We're supposed to be governed by laws and not men. We're supposed to be governed by laws and not Congress. So that's kind of the first thing to get out of the way. Now, Here's another kind of question. The federal government doesn't exactly enforce things on the ground. So let's just say that they pass the statutory instrument, which it really doesn't look like it's going to get through the Senate. But how would they enforce it?
That's $1 trillion question right there.
So, I mean, I can tell you by how they enforce other things, because this is a healthcare statutory instrument, and it's probably undoubtedly going to go under the title for public health and safety. They would, my guess is the most functional way that they could probably enforce this is by not actually having any real enforcement, but by withholding Obamacare supplemental money from states that didn't go along with the program, that didn't go along with the statutory instrument or meet the minimum requirements. The only thing is like, I live in South Carolina, and South Carolina has the most privacy rights out of all 50 states in the union. And we also accept the least amount of money from the federal government. I remember when Obamacare passed, and after Obamacare passed, Nikki Haley was still the governor. My parents got really, really upset that Nikki Haley refused to take the Obamacare money. And we also don't take money for like CPS because we don't have a growing CPS system. DSS is not real loved around these parts. And so basically, when the federal government is not bribing the state government with the money that it robbed from the state citizens in the first place, after that point, they really don't have any leverage. They really don't have any way of actually enforcing, because the way that our government is supposed to work is that the federal government is really just supposed to represent the states to the rest of the world. You know, it's like a trade union. We couldn't have Georgia and South Carolina competing with each other on how we trade cotton to the rest of the world. So the federal government would basically set and regulate that trade. And that's where they're supposed to get their money from too, is by putting tariffs on those trades, on those goods being exported or imported. And of course, that's not a huge winner for the economy, because when you put higher tariffs, like what happened with electronics and fireworks with China, what, back 2 years ago when Trump did that?
It might have been more. Yeah, pre-COVID, it was about 2 years, I think.
So, but that actually tremendously slowed down trade coming in from China.
Yeah.
So that's never really a popular idea. But if you think about it, from the signing of the Constitution of the United States until 1913, all of the taxes, all of the roads, all of the public services, everything was paid for by tariffs and taxes on corporation and industry. And now that has completely reversed. And now they tax everybody for personal income. And we all know about Microsoft and Google and Apple and Amazon parking billions of dollars offshores to not pay taxes on it. So the entire system is really flipped upside down.
I was just going to say to the listeners, if you're not catching on to the theme here, the trend, it's the whole idea of do your chores or you don't get your allowance. How is that pertaining to things broadly speaking? Is if you don't have a benefit that can be stripped away from you by the giver, the government, the governing body. I don't know if you guys can see my air quotes, but if you don't submit and go for their benefit, they have nothing they can take from you.
The thing about that is that, it's like do your chores or you don't get your allowance, but really it's more sinister than that. It's like do your chores or we won't give you back some of the money we stole from you in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good point.
When you get down to the thick of it, that's really what's going on.
And by the way, here's a new chore, and maybe you to your core, you're against taking out the trash, and all of a sudden that's thrown on your plate,
Maybe taking out the trash is against my religious beliefs.
Exactly.
Yeah, which, it's actually interesting to note how many states, like in their original constitutions right after the Revolutionary War, most of the states actually had um, a section in there under the Declaration of Rights that says more or less that you can always follow your conscience as long as you're not hurting anybody. And it goes right under with the whole freedom of religion, the freedom to practice your beliefs out in public. Is you have the right to follow your conscience as long as you are not hurting other people deliberately. Um, and I think that's something that we really got to go back to, because government has become so coercive.
Oops. Sorry about that. I accidentally muted you. I was trying to click the other thing.
I see how it is, man. You trying to limit my free speech too?
No, I just think we should consider what's reasonable.
We got to limit free speech reasonably.
Yeah.
And that's where it always starts. Anyways, kind of going back to the whole statutory instrument and the way that the states are supposed to govern themselves. Because before Roe versus Wade, there were states where people could get abortions. Ever since the inception, like if you go to the actual common law that came from England, abortion was never kosher, not until the early 1900s. And it caused a lot of problems with abortion not being kosher, because you can't stop people who really get in their mind what they're going to do. And so by having abortion completely off the table, no way to get it in a civilized doctorate society, what happens is that you have a bunch of people doing things that are incredibly bad for everybody's health behind closed doors because they're just that desperate.
Yeah.
So I don't know what everybody's stance is on abortion, but on this show we advocate freedom and freedom of personal choice. But the thing that I think is really interesting, and that I find absolutely hilarious about Roe versus Wade, and this was in all of the articles that I found on this 3577 House resolution or whatever the number is, but they all said, it's all about protecting the privacy rights of individuals, not necessarily just women, but of individuals. And that's really what Roe versus Wade was about. Roe versus Wade was not about abortion. Roe versus Wade was about the government not having the right to come in to the relationship with a woman and her doctor and forcibly make medical decisions one way or another. That's what Roe versus Wade was really about. That's what all of these articles that I read on that bill is actually about. So when you actually apply that idea, you apply that logic to Obamacare goes directly against Roe versus Wade. There is no privacy. All of the information that goes to your healthcare provider goes to the government. And now we have COVID passports just on the horizon.
So, sorry, I was just thinking, down the road, right? And what this implication could mean if it were to be, codified, and what that would mean, fairly speaking, between red states and blue states. Now, does it seem like there could be a giant flip? Example, South Carolina, let's say, doesn't accept really any health funding from the federal government, or not a significant amount.
Yeah, we don't accept Obamacare. We accept Medicaid and Medicare.
Okay.
But
So
those are different programs from Obamacare.
So now, okay, it just my theory just got broken up, but I'll sound it out anyway. Let's say the federal Biden or Looney Tune far out there left authoritarian, we want to control everything you do, type government body decides to use this as a way to bring a federal mandate or law about forced vaccinations. Now, South Carolina say, well, go pack sand. I got nothing to lose. You're not my boss. We're not going to do that. But California is going to jump at that money, and I'm going to be standing with my back against the wall, picking them off. So never mind. My theory crumbled on itself.
I mean, I don't think that you would be the only one. I mean, I can tell you this much. I personally believe if they came down with some type of federal mandate, well, like some federal statute to try and forcibly force people to take the vaccine, I think that there would be a civil war. And I don't necessarily count that idea out altogether. I mean,
Yeah.
this country's divided. It's more divided than it's ever been. And that typically leads to a civil war is when you have people divided by ideology. And it wouldn't be nearly as clean today as it was back in 1863, because in 1863, you pretty clearly had the ideology divided by geographical location. Whereas today, you got Democrats in red states, you have Republicans in blue states, and I mean, even take California. I mean, I would still say that 4 out of 10 voters are Republican.
Yeah.
Even though it's not enough for them to really win, on the state level, on the federal level. I know that a lot of counties around California have a fairly Republican county government.
Yeah. I'm in. I believe it's the most conservative state or county of California, which doesn't necessarily, help everything, but it's a thing.
Well, I
But,
mean, I'm just saying a civil war of ideology at that point. It's
yeah.
you're going to have neighbors against neighbors.
Yeah. Well, when you
well,
got a whole town or city saying, defund the police, and then that escalates to we should just be able to kill cops whenever. And cops, so I've heard anyway, many of them somewhat respect their Second Amendment. And so it just kind of makes you think, would the cops join the kill cops crowd, or would they say, these people over here don't cause much trouble, I'm going to go over there? But anyway, off topic.
yeah, well, I mean, I just heard a couple of reports today talking about a significant number of the police force in various different states are resigning, mainly in hard blue states. I think like a third, either a quarter or a third of LAPD is ready to hand in their resignation if they're forced to take the vaccine. I think it's about a quarter.
Yeah. And once that happens, there's more that would follow that just aren't express about it yet,
I don't know, because what I was looking at, it's like they gave them, a month and a half. I don't think these things go into effect until October 17th to October 19th, but they gave them about a month and a half. They're allowing them to apply for exemptions. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get exemptions.
Yeah, they just want a list of who to send the brown shirts after,
Well, and I think that's kind of the scary thing right there is, you have the cops who have some type of moral standing against the vaccine. They're all being pushed out of their position. Anybody in the healthcare industry who has a moral standing against the vaccine, they're being pushed out of their position. A couple of top officials at the FDA left of their own free will because of what happened with the vaccine boosters.
Yeah. Yeah. And one partial lesson for this, for people listening, is when you're free, you should not have to be on any registry or application. If you got to put your name on some list to show that you have beliefs, then you're in the wrong place or you don't have beliefs.
No, I mean, I think it's even more ridiculous than that because you got to put your name on a list to ask if you can exercise your beliefs. If you're allowed to exercise your beliefs, that's absurd.
almost like you're petitioning or praying, correct?
Almost.
Quite literally so.
So, Alice, did you have another question?
Huh.
Yeah, like let's say it's passed. Is it unenforceable? Just like on paper? Is that like the best that could happen?
Is it unenforceable? Well, what do you think the enforceability would be?
Because other stuff like what I still can't believe can be enforced, like the $600 thing that if you receive more than $600, you're going to be reported to the IRS. Like stuff that theoretically makes sense, but in practice, I have a feeling like they're not going to work. I just have a feeling.
Well, I mean, like banks are already reporting the whole $600, like over $600 to the IRS on every transaction. And I'm sure that somebody at the NSA is going to come up with a program to go through all of the metadata to actually break that down and give the government something it can work with, 100%. And I was actually talking about this the other night when I was out with some people, and one of the individuals that was kind of there at the function was like, there's no way that they could do that, there's no way that they could get away with it. And I'm like, absolutely. And you want to know how I know? Is because back in 2003 when George Bush signed the executive order to allow the NSA to start spying on everybody, nobody got really upset. Like they were doing this and they were behind people's backs for probably 4 or 5 years. But when it really came out into the public and it's like, well, yeah, there's this executive order and yeah, we've been spying on everybody for the past 4 or 5 years, nobody got up in arms. It was just like, well, that's kind of disappointing, but I guess if you got to catch the terrorists, freedom,
Yep.
know. And
Tyranny.
so it's the totalitarian tiptoe, man. And now it's down to $600 going in or out of a bank account, and the IRS is tracking it. And again, it's not like they have the manpower or the ability right now to go after every questionable transaction from a bank or that goes into a bank or comes out of a bank. But give it 5 years and they'll have every single one.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't need bodies in agency anymore. We got algorithms now.
Yeah, and even going with the mask now, it's like the way that most of that stuff is getting enforced is on a local level. It's all about groupthink. It's all about the crowd. And you can live in a place where the groupthink is such a way where, if you don't wear a mask, people are going to feel very comfortable in telling you how awful of a person you are for not wearing a mask. It doesn't necessarily seem to work the other way around. Like I've never seen people who weren't wearing a mask going around and telling people who are wearing a mask how stupid they are and ridiculous and this, that, and the other. But you definitely see it the other way around. And to me, that's kind of like a determining factor on which side is right and which side is wrong.
Yep.
If you have to become violent or aggressive or forceful with your ideas, then you're not in the right. Like you are never in the right whenever you have to feel the need to try to force your ideas onto other people.
The forcing it like fills the gap of confidence that the other side has.
Well, I mean, it's like just from my point of view, why would I go out of my way to go tell somebody to take off a mask? Like it's got nothing to do with me. It doesn't
Yep.
bother me. I don't care. Like I don't see why somebody would go out of their way to try and tell another grown adult that they should be wearing a mask.
And you can always tell these things because in their ideology, every point, every social aspect or political point or corner of your life that could possibly be governed, they feel strongly to the core that laws need to control what other people do, not what I do. You know, it's never, we need a law forcing everybody else to put on a mask, or I have the right for you to all do something. It's never, I have the right to wear a mask. It's you have to wear one too. You know what I mean?